we can't get enough.
No, we love them.
We can't get enough of all the setups that people have taken photographs of or
great.
videos of, right, of their home draft rooms. I can't get enough of them.
I mean, Gettleman started this.
Well, the Giants started all. Andy Reid was the,
Andy Reid.
he was the pilgrim who landed on this Plymouth Rock.
Andy Reid got it going.
Andy Reid set up, right? So we saw John Lynch's setup. And, I mean, that setup is
the GOAT.
impressive.
Look at it.
And, again, we took a wager, friendly wager. You say he's calling in right now from phone 2 in the middle.
I said center phone.
And you said left phone, Chris?
Phone left.
Leaving phone right for me. John Lynch, you could make one of the three of us very happy. Which phone are you calling in from right now?
None of the above.
Oh!
I had to make a run to the grocery store, so I'm in a parking lot and about to get masked up and go in there and brave the the elements.
All right, so just give us a few minutes of your time on your cell phone here in a parking lot of whatever grocery store you're in. I mean, what a setup that is, John. John, how many? It looks like 7 screen. It's a 7-screen, 3-phone setup. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of screens. There's a lot there, and I think I don't know. As a player, I think you learn. You prepare for every situation that might be thrown at you, and so all I did. I mean, we are in Silicon Valley, so we have some extremely talented people in our IT, our video department, and basically what Kyle and I did is said we want to replicate what we do on draft day. We know that's impossible, so where we need to be simple, we'd rather do that than be cluttered and complex. And so we kind of described that, and that's essentially how we're going to do it. We're going to have, we involve a lot of people in our draft process. We like hearing from all our coaches, our scouts, and they'll kind of live in one thing we're calling the huddle. That's going to be one virtual thing going on. There's going to be another room, which is our draft room, our John McVay draft room, which we call it, as if we're in our facility. And there'll be that group of people. And then Kyle and I, whenever the draft is getting crazy and you've got people, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We always leave and go to my office, which is adjacent to the draft room. And so we've got JL's office. So that's kind of how we're living. That's what all the screens are for. Other screens are for notes, for our internal system. And so a lot of people, I think, what do you need all that for? That's why you need it. And you've got other teams' needs and such. So a lot of information being, and our crew did a great job setting it up. And I just hope it all works come Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Well, in terms of working, lots of conversation about the run-through, the rehearsal draft that went down on Monday and the issues that were had there. Can you give me any details on how that went from your perspective? What happened?
Well, I think it was a lot of smoke, much ado about nothing. I think the best way I can say it, over the weekend we kind of did an internal mock. And it was the proverbial, I won't say it on air, but you know what show. And
right.
But John Gruden, when I played for him, he used to have a great saying: sometimes you got to do the things you don't want to do so that you can do the things you want to do. And so you have to kind of go through that to see, as much as you plan out in your mind, until you actually go through the scenario, there's issues, unforeseen issues. And so that's kind of what happened on the very first pick. I think everybody was hearing them, Cincinnati, who had some technical difficulties. Jerry came on, and I think the whole league heard them. And so there was that. But then right after that, it got very smooth. And, I think that's why we did it. They'll do more of them today with kind of the IT people. But I think everyone understands that you do kind of have to go through the process to understand, okay, here's an issue. And I really do think it will be as smooth as it can be come Thursday.
Okay, and the Jerry you're referring to, I'm assuming you mean Jones, because we heard from Albert Breer in the first hour of our program from Sports Illustrated that there was a mock Cowboys Bengals trade to throw everybody in the deep end of this rehearsal pool. And so Jerry was the one who was on the phone for everybody?
Yeah, I don't want to be sharing in-house information, but yeah, That's pretty cool. There's few people in this league you just call by the first name. It's like
I know.
Dion, Jerry,
Yeah, right.
And everybody knows who you're talking about. So I screwed that one up. But yeah, he did. And
it's okay.
I always, whether it's at league meetings, wherever it is, I always get such a kick when he speaks up because it's always entertaining.
Right. Well, so look, John. I mean, I knew you were a Stanford guy. You wouldn't be the guy that had a problem with a mute button. I knew that because that's what we're hearing too. That there was the general managers on the phone and that people didn't know when to mute and what have you. But nothing.
Yeah, and you know, that is kind of part of the draft. There's talks you have that you certainly don't want to have other people hearing. I think the best thing they did. I think mask and 6-foot distancing and all that. But our IT. I've got our head video guy is going to be about 7 feet away from me during this whole process.
Right.
And if I get in a pinch, he can handle it. There's a lot of fail safes. If with our system, if my house were to crash, number one, I've got a generator. Number two, then it goes to Adam Peters, and Adam Peters has been along with me. Kyle didn't want any part of turning in a pick, so he's out of the loop. But Adam Peters goes, and then Ethan Waugh, our college scouting director. So there's all those fail safes. There's also you can pick up the phone and call it in, and so I think they've kind of insulated this thing with a ton of different ways that if everything goes awry that we can all function, and I do have good confidence that it's going to go not without a hitch, but I think it will go smoothly.
So in terms of that though, just last thing for you, John, on this subject, nothing insurmountable then from what you got from the mock draft or the rehearsal draft for Thursday. It's all stuff that can be fixed.
I do believe that. I really do, and I think it's going to be entertaining. I really do. I know I made on our media call yesterday, everyone is just craving for something live. The other night, it wasn't even live, but it was something new, The Last Dance.
Yep.
And during this time, I don't watch much TV because anytime you're watching TV, you should be watching film or
Right.
or making calls and talking with people. But that Last Dance, I had to watch it. Michael Jordan's just been the guy for me, and like so many people. And I think there's a very similar feeling. I can't tell you how many people have reached out and said, we are so looking forward to this. And I think there'll be a fun element to seeing people, in their own environment. I'm out hanging out where in the guest house where my parents come and where they stay when they come, where my father-in-law, and I wanted more space, so I'm out there. And I do think it's going to be fun, and we'll make the best of it. This is serious business. This is how you build your teams. But I think we also are mindful of all the people out there that are really hurting, and hopefully we can take their mind off it, give them something else to focus on, and give them something to laugh about, and boo us if they want from home, and all those things that happens with the draft.
I'm into that, John Lynch. I'm into that. And in terms of the draft, nothing gets more exciting when teams move up, move down. You have not one but 2 first-round selections. Reports everywhere that you would be willing to trade not one or both to move down around. What thought process that you can share with us 48 hours before the draft about 13th and 31st overall, John?
Yeah, that's accurate. Last year we hedged a couple things, and one of those, our second round pick was we sent that to the Chiefs for Dee Ford. Our third and fourth round picks, we got a fifth back from Denver, but they, those picks were Emmanuel Sanders now. So we have a big gap between those 2 first round picks and where we're going in the 5th round. And would we trade that? No, that helped us get to the Super Bowl and have a real good chance of winning it. But there is a big gap there. So I think you don't pass up a special difference-making player. And if that's there at 13, we'll stand pat. But if not, and we feel like there's a bunch of those guys still left, then, yeah, we're willing to get out of there to accrue some more picks. But I think the same can be said at 31. So it's kind of fluid. I love, the old comment John Madden used to say, all the people at Fox, what happens when a game breaks out? You can do all the pre-production you want, but then a game breaks out, a draft breaks out, and we'll be ready for all scenarios and looking forward to it.
Well, when you talk about game-changing players, I mentioned this to you before in your previous appearance here on this show, and then when we've chatted offline, that Deebo Samuel is the guy that everybody is looking for now. And in fact, Daniel Jeremiah at the Combine came up with the phrase "finding Debo," that everybody wants to find Debo. So you would know just how deep this wide receiver pool is in this draft. How deep is it compared to what you've seen before?
It's incredibly deep. It really is. Certainly this will be my fourth draft in this capacity. It's as good as class as I've seen. Now, you probably don't have, but how often do you have a Randy Moss, something like that? But what you do have, Eric DeCosta, I think, said it well, you find starter in the fifth round. I really believe that to be true. You start watching, and a lot of positions, it runs dry really quick. I think we were 24 players in, and you're still really enjoying the quality. And the other thing, I said this at the Combine, it's kind of like pick your flavor too. You want a big guy? There's those guys. You want a short, quick guy? They have that. You want a burner? So there's a little bit of everything depending on what you need or what you tend to like as a franchise. It is very strong class at wide receiver, and that there is a ton of depth there.
Well, I got a couple questions for you, John Lynch, that you can touch, but I know these are touchy potential subjects. Certainly 2 days before a draft. Have you gotten any calls about 31st overall from teams you think looking for a fifth year of control for a quarterback? Have you gotten those calls, John?
Not specifically that. A lot of these guys are your friends, and you talk to them throughout the process.
Right.
But I would say that yesterday is when you start kind of actually making formal calls. Hey, just kind of want to let you know our situation. So nothing has got specific in that specific scenario. No, that hasn't happened. But like I said, oftentimes these things happen on the day of the draft, unless you're talking about the first or second pick. They'll happen earlier.
No,
so I anticipate that some of that stuff starts to happen here.
Yeah, I know, because again, that's one of those sweet spot of real estate for two reasons. One, if you're in 31st or 32nd overall, it means you won a Super Bowl or you went to one, and also. That was right around the spot where Lamar Jackson, he was the last pick in the draft in the first round, and Teddy Bridgewater as well. And you clearly have a quarterback of your own, which leads me to my other question here. My colleague Deion Sanders was so open at the Combine about how Tom Brady winding up in San Francisco for Garoppolo would be a perfect spot, and the Niners never said a word. You stayed pat, didn't do anything. And did you and the rest of the 49ers think about making a public statement at any point on this very subject, John?
It's interesting because there were a couple factors in that. Kyle and I had just made a statement at the Combine stating how much we believed in Jimmy. Then these rumors come out. And, the truth of the matter, when you're talking about, and you got to be careful up here because a lot of people up here think the greatest player that ever lived is Joe Montana. So I'm careful always to say when you're talking about one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time with Tom Brady, of course you're going to have some internal discussion. And then you hear rumors that, hey, he'd like to come home, that kind of thing. So, of course, Kyle and I have discussions, but the cool thing, Rich, that we shared with Jimmy is that, we forced ourselves. We're always into getting better. And so you look at everything, especially a situation like that. But within a day or two, Kyle and I looked at each other and said, you know what? We really like what we have in Jimmy. We love everything that he brings, and we really believe it's a long-term answer. And so that's I would tell you we're more convicted than ever about who our quarterback is in Jimmy Garoppolo. Really excited about, despite the challenges of getting better without a traditional offseason, that he can do that. The guy's done nothing but win since he's been here. A lot of people try to pick his game apart for whatever reason. All I know is the guy wins football games, and he's a tremendous teammate, very talented young man, and I think his best football's still ahead of him. So we're as committed to Jimmy as ever. And we've had those discussions with him. That's what was important. We didn't believe, if you start chasing every rumor out there and making a statement on it, then you're doing that all the time. And, yes, this was a bigger one. The important thing was we had talked to Jimmy and told him exactly what I told you.
Yeah, and we had Emmanuel Sanders on when he was after he'd signed with the Saints, and I asked him about the final pass of the Super Bowl that was intended for him. And he had every opportunity to essentially, and he's a veteran, so veterans know how to say something without saying it. he could not have been more full-throated in who Jimmy G is as a leader and who he is as a future, stud quarterback, and that he's already proven it. I mean, he couldn't have been more effusive about Garoppolo, and he's not even on your team anymore, John.
Well, anybody who's been around him, that's just you get a lot of comments, and I often think of the best teammates I've ever played with. Not the best players, but the best teammates. And, Derek Brooks is one that comes to mind. Champ Bailey, they tend to be the better players.
Right, yeah. You named some two good players there, John.
Brad Johnson would fit the bill there. Rondé Barber. But that's something that players, when I'm talking to them all the time, I don't know if I've ever had a better teammate. And you just talked about Emmanuel not throwing him. I mean, the one thing Kyle will always tell you, John, as a quarterback, you have such opportunity all the time, 10 times a game to throw someone out. He was supposed to be at 11 yards. He wasn't. Jimmy never once since he's been here has done that. Every time he puts it on himself. And that's what gives us a lot of confidence. And we've challenged him. We think there's places, and that's coming from Kyle, places in his game where he can improve. And the great thing is Jimmy embraces those, and we're going to try to get that best out of him. And we think he's already been tremendous. So, I would leave it with that. We're as convicted as ever about him being our quarterback and leading this organization into the future.
John, I appreciate the time. Are you sitting in a parking lot getting set to go get your groceries for your family? I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, one last thing about that shot of your office. I could not help but notice what appears to be an original Leroy Neiman of the catch on your wall. Is that an original Leroy Neiman of the catch on your wall?
Yeah, that's a great call. We have an executive assistant. Yeah. To Prague Marate, and she came up one day and she said, my parents were friends with Leroy Neiman. There's about, I don't want to, I forget what the number is. There's very few of them.
Right.
Leroy Neiman did it, and she gave me one. And full disclosure, that hasn't been hanging in my guest house, but when it came to draft, I didn't want to do a bunch, but my daughter came in and said, Dad, you need something with the Niners.
Yeah.
And so I put up the catch. Dwight was one of my favorite people. That play, obviously, such a historic play in this organization. So I thought it was fitting to have it there, and it's been cool to look over at that. That's the kind of player we're looking for. Both Montana and Dwight Clark.
And Leroy Neiman. I mean, like if you're looking,
Leroy Neiman. Yeah.
I mean, that is, I mean, that all the technology you have in your spot right now, that could be the most valuable of them all on that wall, John. That's impressive.
The coolest thing.
How about me? How about me having an eye for art? How about that?
I know, that's pretty good. That is really good.
John, thanks for the time, man. Best to you and your family. You're one of my favorites. I really appreciate the call.
Well, right back at you. Stay safe with your family. And,
you too, John.
I mean that to everybody out there. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Thanks again, and good luck with the draft. Thanks for doing it. That's John Lynch.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's John Lynch right here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.